Why does God need to be set free?
Because we have projected our image of our goodness and our evil onto him. I'm fascinated by the whole notion of projection that Carl Jung spoke about. And it reminds me when I was a little child growing up in Ireland. For the first 6 years of my life, I lived with my grandparents. And I was the first great-grandchild and the first grandchild. And I had an uncle who was 2 months younger than me. No, my uncle Noel. I was born in October 1946. He was born in December 1946. So we were raised like twins. And there was a movie theatre in Cork City called the Lido. And in case you think it was this luxurious place, it was like a big barn of a building with wooden forms and a whitewashed wall that they projected the movies onto. And it would be particularly on Saturday mornings, movies about cowboys and Indians, or else, Tarzan movies. We loved those. And the price for admission was 2 milk bottles. Milk was delivered in bottles, and if you brought in clean milk bottles, you got free access to the movie. So we got onto the movie, 2 milk bottles, and we fill our pockets with stones. And when the bad guy came on the screen and he's creeping up behind the good guy, we'd say, "Watch out behind you! Watch out! He's catching up with you!" And of course he wouldn't listen. So we take out our stones and we start pelting the screen with our stones, hoping we could intervene. And then the big steward would come in, the lights would come on, a big steward would come in, grab 2 or 3 kids randomly, kick their asses out, and the lights would go back down and the movie would start again. And we'd be very quiet for maybe 5 or 6 minutes until the good guy was in danger again and the stones would come out and we start projecting the stones at it. Now, I think that's what we do as human beings constantly. When we project on an individual basis, we make it difficult to have good interpersonal relationships. When we project as a culture, we have, prejudices of various kinds. And we have kind of blind spots as an entire, global community. We dump all our stuff onto nature itself. And so there's a garbage patch in the North Pacific, or the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is the result of garbage that's thrown off the west coast of America, the east coast of Asia, and ships at sea. And it's as big as the state of Texas right now, all these plastics and stuff like that. So it's like you can't actually throw anything away. You're just throwing it someplace else, but you can't throw it away. Any place you throw it, it's part of Gaia. And so I think projection, Carl Jung spoke about projection. He said, the shadow is actually 80% gold. Uh-huh. It is 80% unrealized potential. So instead of having heroes that you kind of, you watch in television, why not develop the skills that you see kind of exemplified in these people? Make yourself fit. And he said it is 20% repressed traumata. And so the projection, we project onto our heroes and we project onto the villains instead of acknowledging our own abilities and our own darkness. And so I think we've done this in spades. We do it in interpersonal dynamics. We do it in intercultural warfare. We do it at a global level with the nature itself. And I think we do it on the cosmos. We have created this caricature of God built in our own image and likeness. So he has all our good traits and he's got all our bad traits. And so the last book that I wrote, I put this God in trial, for crimes against humanity. How could he have done all this evil stuff that he did to us, which is recorded, in the scriptures? Come to the realization. So I had a defense and a prosecution. In the prosecution, I had a Bible scholar, and I had a clinical psychologist, and I had a contract lawyer. And in the defense, I had a Jungian analyst, I had an archaeologist, another Bible scholar, and a mythologist. And so they duked it out between them to find out. And the verdict finally was that, the God that's on trial is a projection of the human shadow. It is not really God. And so setting God free was, if we set God free from our projections, God sets us free from our illusions. And that's the contract. So it's a bilateral agreement that to the extent that we can set God free from our projections onto God, then God sets us free from our illusions about who God is and who we are and what our purpose is.
What happens if we don't?
What happens if we don't is that we tend to see the evil in everybody, ignore the evil in ourselves or the darkness in ourselves and project it onto other people. We make war with them, we got angry with them, because every single one of us is born as a narcissist. Every little infant is a narcissist, and rightly so. A child is totally self-concerned. It needs milk from mother, it needs cuddling, it needs to hear human voice, it needs to be warm. And so we start at the end of the scale, which is pure narcissism. But we're expected to move towards, so it's all service to self initially. And it's properly that it be that. But then we move gradually into service to others, kind of the Mother Teresa's of the world, or the Mahatma Gandhi's of the world, or the Buddhas of the world. So when we don't, if we're stuck at the narcissistic level, then we develop jealousies, and it's all based on fear. I think we're only born with 2 emotions, fear and love. And when fear is self-directed, it becomes poor self-esteem. And when it's other-directed, it becomes anger. When love is self-directed, it becomes good self-esteem. And when it's other-directed, it becomes compassion. And all of the virtues and vices are permutations and combinations of these two. And so I think that the greatest fear a little infant has is not the fear of not being loved, but rather the fear of being unlovable. And it happens at around the age of about 7 months, I believe, that the little baby is born and it's locked in this, what psychology will call the mother-child complex. The child does not realize there are two of us. There's only one of us, and I'm in charge. When I'm hungry, I scream and a breast appears. When I'm cold, somebody cuddles me, according to my needs. And so about the age of 7 months, the child suddenly realizes, oh my God, there are two of us and all the power's on the other side. She can leave me, I can't leave her. And so I now develop all these kinds of defense mechanisms to try to level the playing field. So for some kids, they'll be really cuddly and loving and smiling, so mommy and daddy will love me. Or for others, just scream my head off and force them back into the room to take care of me. And so we develop these defense mechanisms very, very early on. So now, we're identified with an ego. And at this stage now, it's about me looking after what my needs are. And so I'm going to develop my fear, will morph into anger at others and selfishness, and rage sometimes. And then I begin to project that onto not just mother and father, but brothers and sisters and the extended community, and then finally to the world community. And so at that stage then, we see everybody else as kind of competitors for the little amount of love which is available in the world. And now I'm going to grab my share, and tough luck if you don't get your share.
Uh-huh.
And that scales all the way up, I think, from kind of family kind of interactions, negative family interactions, all the way up, I believe, actually, to cosmological warfare. I believe, actually, that there are beings out there who are much more advanced technologically than we, but that they may not be more morally advanced than we are. And so one time I asked for, I seed my dreams a lot since, I've been recording my dreams since about 1979. And I see them, so I'll have a thought in my mind before I go to sleep. Here's a question I want an answer to. And a few years ago, I asked the question, can you tell me the difference between sin and evil? And the answer I got at 4 o'clock in the morning was, sin is the infraction of a culturally created precept. It's just breaking human law. Whereas evil is a cosmic conspiracy using human intermediaries to separate souls from source. And so I think that there are energies and entities out there who are technologically advanced, even have great psychological abilities, but who are not advanced spiritually or morally, and they regard earth as playthings. And so for me, the results of not realizing that until we start projecting onto God, we're not free of our illusions, that scales all the ways up to interfamily dynamics, all the ways up to the cosmos itself. So the results are literally cosmic warfare.
To step out of this cosmic warfare, I think we have to move beyond this idea of the finitude of love and move into the infinity of love that's available. And I think that's one of the things that's drawn people to Yeshua, is that was an avatar who expressed a universal infinite love, like Jesus loves you. You'll see it graffitied on walls or plastered on church billboards. And there's something very powerful about that idea of God as universal love. It's not something that you need, to carve out your piece of the pie, that any piece of the pie, one cherry from the pie, contains the infinity of it all.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I totally agree with you. So I asked at one stage as well for a definition of Christ consciousness in my dreams. And the definition I got was that Christ consciousness is the permanent awareness of the inner divinity of all beings. And so being Christ conscious is being able to see the divine in everything. The oak tree, you and I were looking at manzanita tree this morning, the divinity within a manzanita bush, the divinity within a bunny rabbit, the divinity within other members of society, the divinity within my enemy figure. It doesn't mean that I have to agree with everything they're doing, and it doesn't even mean that I can't resist evil. But what it means is, in the course of resisting and coming from a form of love which has the ability to confront what is not right. And so it becomes really, really important then that we recognize that love is infinite, and that we are holographic fractals of God, and God is love. It's not that God has love. God is love. They're synonyms. God and love are synonyms. And so I think about it then that love is, God self-fractures. If there is only God, then God is really lonely because there's no relationship possible. And if there's no relationship possible, evolution is not possible. And so I think initially God sang herself a lullaby. Yeah. And the lullaby brought creation into being. And the Aborigines in Australia have the same notion that reality, the world was brought into being through the songs of our ancestors. That it literally, the logos, the frequency, the sound is what initiated both separation and love. And so God sings herself a lullaby and thus is creating all of the artifacts of the cosmos. And that every fractal then, in Hebrew we use the word netzotzot, that were sparks of the divine, and that everyone is a holographic fractal. Now a hologram is an entity that contains the totality of itself and every one of its component parts. And a fractal is a pattern that repeats at an infinite number of scales. And so there's nothing in the cosmos, literally nothing in the cosmos, from a quark to a nation, that is not a spark of the divine. And so love then is about, managing to recognize that spark in the other, in spite of the kind of the shield the other is wearing, or the kind of the disguise in which the other is appearing, to be able to see that level of love with them, so that it activates that love in myself. Now, love is going to demonstrate itself in various ways. So, for instance, father love in a family is partially about disciplining the child. Because I think there's the difference between father love and mother love is that mother love teaches the child how to be in harmony within the family, and father love teaches the child how to be in harmony outside the family with the culture. And so sometimes discipline is necessary. That's a form of love. So we have to have a kind of a repertoire in our arsenal of ways in which to love in particular circumstances, all the ways from total compassion to confrontation of and resisting of evil. So for me, that would be the love.
You mentioned yesterday that there's 4 levels of compassion.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share those with us.
Yeah, brilliant. So I actually believe the mathematician in me wants to say that it's actually a 5x4 matrix, that there are 4 expressions and 5 levels. So I'll give you the 2 of them. For me, the 4 levels of compassion are, I call them the 4 C's. The first one is confirmation. And if I were to use an example, let's say basketball, you're a great basketball player. A basketball team. So the first level of compassion is confirmation. Attaboy, Aubrey, brilliant shot. I love it. 3-pointer, just when we needed it. Great going. So that's the first level of compassion, is a confirmation. Attaboy. The second one is cooperation. You're the guard or whatever, I'm the kind of the forward, under the post or whatever. So we're playing different roles in the team. So cooperating and fulfilling my function in the team is really important, and allowing the other members to fulfill their function in the team. The third one is compensation. There's an interception. I was trying to throw you the ball and it got intercepted, and now somebody else on our team rushes in and re-intercepts the ball. So the third level is kind of compensation for the mistakes of other team members. And the fourth one is confrontation. Somebody is playing really, really selfishly. They want to dribble the ball from one post to post. They won't share with anybody, even though they're surrounded. They won't call a timeout. They want to try and break through. And so they're benched. They're taken off. They're replaced in some way. So for me, then, compassion has these 4 facets. And we must be able to kind of activate all 4 depending on the circumstances in which we find ourselves. So it's a compassionate thing to do, to confront evil, but to do it out of a loving heart in the recognition that the other person is divine as well. So I would say there are the 4 levels. And then there's kind of 5 facets of compassion. The first one is literally neurological, that we're born with mirror neurons. And the little baby actually develops this by watching the faces of mother and father. They're developing these mirror neurons and they're learning how to behave and emotionally interact with the environment. But they literally are mirror neurons. And they've done some really, I think, horrendous kind of research on this, where they take 2 monkeys and they put electroencephalograms in both of them, and they torture one monkey while the other guy is watching. And they're looking what area of the brain of the person being tortured is being activated by the torture, and what area of the brain of the observer monkey. And it's the same area of the brain. So that's how they discovered mirror neurons, that literally there's a neuronal circuit in my brain that's activated by watching somebody else suffer. So I would say that's the neurological level of compassion. The next level, I think, would be psychological. There's an emotional reaction to watching somebody in pain. Literally in my heart I can feel for somebody who's suffering. That'll be the second. The third one then for me would be the sociological level of it. Okay, somebody's been diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to bring around meals for them during the week because they can't cook for themselves. Or I'm going to take them to their doctor's appointments or whatever. So that's the sociological level of it. And then there's kind of a spiritual level, and that is prayer. that I can beam laserized intentionality at somebody who's suffering, and that this energetic exchange is actually benefiting them. And the fifth level is mystical. And that is that this is God's gig. When I've done everything I can, neurologically, psychologically, sociologically, and spiritually, now I realize this is God's gig. There's a reason that this person is experiencing what they're experiencing, and every single one of us is meant to harvest every circumstance in our life and to harvest it to develop, our particular mission. So it's not that I back off and then abandon them, but I realize when I do everything I can do, I have to hand it off to God and say, your way in your time.
Mm.
So for me, that was like the kind of the 5x4 matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On the biological level, you're talking about them running an experiment, questionable morality about that experiment because they're torturing monkeys. But it occurs to me that probably the scientists were not experiencing from a mirror neuronal capacity the suffering of the monkey because they had sufficiently separated themselves from the monkey. They've made themselves other. And I think the function of biological compassion can be broken the moment that we other somebody else, because it doesn't have to be another species. It's easy to do that with another species. The lion doesn't feel the compassion for the gazelle, but it may feel that for another, for its cub or something else that's in danger. There's many cases of a species looking out for its own species, but not giving a fuck about another species. Sea otters. I won't go into the atrocities that sea otters commit to baby seals. Horrible. Serial rape, necrophilia. It's dark, right? So there's a biological function that's kind of ethnocentric or species-centric. And one of the tricks that we've played or been deceived into believing is this myth of separation, which breaks that first level of compassion, which is you are other than. And I think it's been part of the foundational ideology of all wars. You dehumanize the other. And then therefore, how were people able to watch public hangings, tortures, executions? They'd othered that other person.
And bring their sandwiches along.
Exactly. So in this othering process, it's very dangerous because you're breaking something that we're meant to hold.
That's you're absolutely right. And so, as I say, then Christ consciousness is the permanent awareness of the inner divinity of all other beings, including the sea otters or whatever. But I think that we experiment in 3D density. We experiment with all different life forms, all the way from flora to fauna to Homo sapiens and beyond. And so we have to experience what it's like to be in that level of densification. So in some parts of the animal kingdom, they're driven by pure instinct. There's no rationality involved in it. They're not thinking stuff through. And so there's an instinctual attraction to protect your own or to savage somebody else's or lion. A lion will kill all the cubs with a female by another male. And so it's like there's an instinct to respond to any life situation in the lower levels of the animal kingdom. Now, within the species, then very often there's an affinity and a protection of them. So as we kind of scale up to different experiences of incarnation, all the way up to the human family. The human family for me may be the first level at which we truly have the capacity to experience the suffering of others who are not part of our kin or even part of our species. And so I think there are levels beyond that I think there are the great 7 levels of Hinduism, that there's a physical body, there's an etheric body, there's an astral body, there's a mental body, there's a psychic body, there's a soul body, and there's the source self. And at this stage of human development, I believe we're somewhere in between the kind of the astral and the animated. So I believe that planet Earth itself, Gaia, and you and I talked last night, you had this beautiful piece that you read about a Gaia Sophia, this beautiful notion of Gaia Sophia. I think that Gaia herself has 7 different levels of body as well. That there's the physiosphere, the third rock from the sun in the solar system. There's the atmosphere, which is the womb of the planet. So she creates a womb for herself in order to gestate life. The third level is the biosphere, and now she's giving birth to flora and fauna. And then there's the kind of the stage we're approaching now is the noosphere. Teilhard de Chardin talked about the noosphere from the Greek word nous, meaning mind. That now there's a sheath of consciousness around the biosphere. And it's a very dangerous transition going from biosphere to noosphere, because we have the technological capacity to literally destroy even the physiosphere itself in a nuclear holocaust. And so that transition is really, really difficult. And that's where we're at right now. Now, I believe there are 3 more stages after that. There's what I call, the next one is the anima sphere. Anima from the Latin meaning soul, that is the soul of the planet. And then the next one, I call it the pneuma sphere, pneuma meaning spirit in Greek, the spirit of the planet itself, and then ultimately source itself. And that we're pacing Gaia in this movement, in this evolutionary trajectory. And that as we're moving into the noosphere, so is Gaia. And that in some senses, our respect for life and our protection of life would be such that we won't need the same elements in order to sustain us, that we're not identified anymore with our mere physicality or even our emotionality, or our rationality, that we're identified with the soul self. And so I think it will be possible that we can actually survive on energy transfers of various kinds, which may not involve taking life at all, of any kind. But, we may approach that piece, but it is appropriate that it's earlier stages of it. We're going to need to eat vegetables or maybe kill, in order to eat. And when that's done in a kosher fashion, with respect for the one who's sacrificing its life on our behalf, that can be actually a prayer in some senses. But when we outgrow that stage and we don't need that level of sustenance anymore in order to survive in these 3-dimensional spacesuits, we'll eschew that, and literally become breatharians, in some senses. Now, I think we're a long way from that, but I think that's part of our trajectory. So we have to honor the stage at which we find ourselves, but realize that is not the final destination. So what are the practices, that we can engage in that elevate our energy levels beyond the mere physical, beyond the etheric, beyond the astral, beyond the rational, into the kind of the realization that I'm a bite-sized piece of God who volunteered for incarnation. And how do I sustain myself? And how do I protect those whom I love without having to take any life in any form whatsoever?
I've always been a collector since I was a kid. Whether it was sports cards, magic cards, comics, stamps, or coins. And as I've gotten older, I've transitioned to collecting original art. I also believe in precious metals as one of the safest and most stable stores of wealth. The impossibly cool thing about my new company, Metalmark, as part of the Aubrey Marcus Collective, is that it combines both of these things that I love. Fully assayable and recoverable fractional gold notes, paired with impossibly beautiful, cool, and collectible limited edition art. So if for some reason you don't like the art anymore, or the art loses its value, you can always just keep the gold. If any other class of art loses its value, all you are left with is paper, or in the case of NFTs, pixels. And if you are just starting in collecting gold, instead of having to drop $2,700 on a coin like this, you can get in for less than a Benjamin. You talk about several different paths that we've taken. So there's this caricature of God, and you put that caricature of God on trial. And it's pretty clear, and I was a philosophy major with a focus on philosophy of religion, and one of the things one of my favorite professors told me was that if you're going to worship a God, that God has to be worthy of worship.
Yes, brilliant.
And to be worthy of worship, they at least have to be better, and we made a joke yesterday, than half the people at your local pub. Like if God's not better than half the people at your local pub, like if you would say you're an asshole, like you wouldn't worship that half of the pub, right? Yeah. So, and God of the Bible fails on a lot of those criteria. And you make that case brilliantly in the book, that this idea of God in the fundamentalist way is not a God that's worthy of our worship. Now the question is, that's a curiosity to me, is this a being that we've created, just projected it, or does this being have primacy and we're actually worshiping either an egregore of our own creation that is actually then a real being, or is this a being that was created perhaps on another planet or in another time, or just part of the fabric of the cosmos itself? So I guess I would love you to explore the idea of whether this God that fundamentalists worship is actually a real being, or just simply an idea that we've created.
Okay. I think both of the above. I think it's brilliant. Brilliant articulation, Aubrey. So for one thing, I think, with projection, there has to be a screen. You can't project into empty space. There has to be something to hold it. So there must be something on the screen that's capable of holding the image that we project onto it. And so that's true in interpersonal dynamics as well. There are some people with whom it's very easy to get angry because in some senses they're holding a screen, and they have some of the same attributes that I have that I'm failing to acknowledge in myself. So I find it very easy to kind of project onto them. They're an easy target. So that partly is that the screen itself have to have something about it that makes it projectionable. So I think that's the first thing. So to answer that part of the question, I would say that there definitely are beings, on whom, who influenced us. They're like the cargo cults. There's this notion of the cargo cults. During World War II, both the Japanese and the American airmen were using islands, I believe in Micronesia, or Polynesia perhaps, where they were using it as landing grounds and as they attacked each other. And they would come in with all this great cargo. And the natives, very, very primitive peoples, thought these were gods coming from the skies in these flying machines. And they brought all these goodies with them that they distributed, the cargo. And then the war ended and these guys disappeared. No more flights coming in. And they're really freaking out. So they start creating runways and they start creating antennae from bamboos and stuff like that, trying to bring the guys back with the cargo. So they're called cargo cults. So they really believe that these airmen were literally gods and they worship them and try to bring them back in. Now, I think we've done the same thing with extraterrestrial entities. And I believe that we've actually we've invited in 3 different kinds of divinities. The first group I call, regional divinities, that there were some extraterrestrial civilizations who've occupied particular parts of real estate on planet Earth and colonized it for particular resources, whether it was mining gold in South Africa, whatever they needed. So that's one group. I call them regional divinities. And if you move into that kind of geographical region, you have to pay obedience to that particular divinity. We made gods of them. The second group I call a kind of tribal divinities, and these were gods who attached themselves to particular nations, and if the nation was a nomadic nation, the gods traveled around with them and protected them. And then the third group I call portfolio gods, and this is like, if you're into agriculture, here's the guy you need to follow. If you're into warfare, here's the guy you need to follow. Into art, here's the guy you need to follow. Into erotic behavior, here's the guy you need to follow. And so the Israelites had a big problem with that. They had this god, they call Yahweh, who led them out of Egypt allegedly, beat the crap out of everybody in the Sinai Peninsula and in the land of Canaan and gave them the land, and then they got to the land and there's famine and there's drought. And they go, wow, this guy is really good at making war. He does not diddly squat about agriculture. So let's look at somebody else more kind of appropriate. And they started falling the Baals. And then you had this struggle between 2 extraterrestrial entities. And so,
are they extraterrestrial or extra dimensional?
I think both. I think they may have physiological attributes, or they may be so technologically advanced that they're interdimensional with the ability to manifest in 3D reality as well. So it could be both and.
So extra dimensional, like the real God is,
yes.
But there's beings that are holographic fractals of that extra dimensional thing that have a physical density.
Absolutely. I said there are possibly 10 layers. When you read Rudolf Steiner's work, the various layers of the kind of the of the dimensions, all the way from God, herself or himself, through angelic beings like Lucifer, a being of light, all the way down to kind of lesser angels, archangels and lesser angels, down to extra terrestrials who are physical beings. So I think, that we've experimented with every possible level of, self-expression. I think I may have said to you the last time we were together, I had a really powerful, when I was in Kenya, I got malaria a lot, and it would give me altered states of consciousness. And although I'm not inoculated, I picked up COVID at a wedding I was doing down in Arizona a few years ago. And for 6 or 7 days, I had these weird altered states of consciousness. But I had some powerful visions during it. So it was well worth it to me. And in this particular vision, I got this notion that originally there was only God. But because there is only God, no relationships are possible. And because no relationships are possible, no experiences are possible. And because no experiences are possible, evolution is not possible. And so God sang herself a lullaby, and self-fractured into these nets, so it seemed, these myriads of souls. And God is amazed at what she has just created, because now there's something to relate to. and these are beings who can generate experiences on God's behalf. But then in my vision, I saw that God called the very first pre-cosmic conference. And we sat down with God and said, can we do something fun together, God and us? And the decision was, let's create a cosmos. And we created a cosmos, an extraordinary cosmos, and we're in awe of what we just created. So we're in the state of Turiya in Buddhism, this notion of this witnessing consciousness. Look what we've just done together as a group. And we enjoy that for millennia. And then God called a second conference and said, can we go even better? What if we were to kind of create avatars and insert ourselves into the cosmos and actually play roles within it and take the part of, trees or animals or whatever? What would that be like? And that would be Turiyatita, the ability to participate in and at the same time witness from the outside, what cultural anthropology will call the participant observer. The guy who goes into the Amazon, village in the middle of the jungle and is taking notes of what are the natives doing. And of course, he's hugely influencing what the natives are doing. He's part of, what they're reacting to. And so for me, the realization then that all the ways up and all the ways down, we're encountering these levels of manifestation so that the avatars the souls have chosen span the entire spectrum of really, really, really advanced technologically and spiritual beings, but who all have free will, all the ways down to us, three-dimensional beings, and I think even lower than that, people who are stuck in hell. And hell is not a place where we're separated from God. It's a place where we separate ourselves through our frequencies from love. And that's the hell, being separated from love. And people who are stuck in that dimension really, really are really hurting. And they're hurting the rest of us. And so there's this great passage in the Nicene Creed in Catholicism that says, when Jesus was in the tomb after being crucified, he descended into hell and spent 3 days in hell. And for me, what that means is, it wasn't just enough that he wanted to bring light to three-dimensional reality or three-dimensional densification. He wanted to go down to people who had totally kind of cut off their connection with love so as to experience light at that dimension and raise up their vibration and bring them out of that. And so to kind of, to bring light where there was just utter darkness, the utter darkness of being cut off, through my own behavior to the source of all love that there is. And so I think that we span this entire trajectory of dimensions, and that at every level there are beings, all of whom have free will, and so their power and their abilities may not be commensurate with their morality, or their sense of love. And so that there are beings at every level, who are dark forces and who, enjoy earthlings as playthings, by making us feel anger or rage or, or warfare, that they're literally feeding energetically off that. Now, I think that part of what I read about extraterrestrials, and I'm a big believer that they actually exist, is that through technological innovation, they've gradually cut themselves off from their sexuality. They have no sex organs anymore. Through food, they don't have mouths to eat anymore. That's not how they're nurturing themselves, or their sense of smell, that they're totally living in their brain. So there's no emotion, there's no virtue, there's no compassion whatsoever, because of a kind of a transhumanist agenda, maybe millennia or billennia ago, a place we're heading at this stage if we don't watch what we're doing. And so that they're so cut off from their virtue and their life that the only way that they can energize the system is by feeding on human distress. And so they're orchestrating situations, in which we're generating anger and rage and warfare, and that's food for them. Just like, as I said, two people attending a dog fight, putting two dogs savaging each other and taking bets on who's going to win. And that's how they're energizing themselves. And so I think that that's part of the equation. And so it becomes very important then that we create alliances with the light beings, who are totally in alignment with love, and who are using their own willpower to grow in love and to grow in compassion for others. But there are other beings out there, I believe, who are exercising their free will, for their own selfish purposes. And God backs off and says, I give you free will. That was my greatest gift to you. I give you free will. Up to you to decide how to use it. Now, I think eventually everybody learns through trial and error, that selfishness does not work. Anger doesn't work, ever. It never creates peace, ultimately. So no matter how many lifetimes it takes me, or how many incarnations it takes me, or how many wars it takes me until we get it as a species, it ain't working, dude. Can we try something else? trial and error, see if something else works. And there's these great teachers throughout history who said, okay, try this, try love, try peace, try forgiveness, try compassion. The Buddha, Mahatma Gandhi or Jesus turned the other cheek. So there have been teachers who come and show there is another way, but they're not going to force it on us. They're going to say, here it is, practice it and see if it works. And it works. When you practice it, it works. If you don't practice it, it ain't going to work. Yeah. And if you practice the alternative, make war, you make more war.
Yeah. We're always creating more of what we are putting out into the world, like attracts like.
Yeah.
And still, nonetheless, there is that place for confrontation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is the paradox that needs to be handled with great philosophical, theological understanding of like what we might have to do to protect and take care of our fellow beings.
Yeah, very important. And it's important to realize that some people will talk about Jesus saying, turn the other cheek or don't resist evil. But they're choosing particular statements. Jesus is a master of paradox. And by telling parables, he's showing the multifaceted realities in which we exist. And so he was a great resistor himself. He would call out the Pharisees, you blind hypocrites. You travel over land and sea to make a single convert, and when you convert them, you make them twice as fit for hell as you are yourself. Blind Pharisees, you create laws and you lay them on people's shoulders, and you won't lift a finger to help them yourself. So he's really calling them. He's overturning the money changers' tables. So he's able to confront. He knows when to confront. And so that for me is like, that's the 20%. That's one of the ways that you're compassionate, by confronting evil. And sometimes, I think it is necessary to physically resist evil. I'm sure, if you saw a child being molested, and the only way you could take the guy out was to punch the lights out of him, you'd do it. I would, certainly, if I saw a child being molested. And so to stand by and say, may God forgive you, I forgive you, and not do anything. So we have to intervene. The question is, am I intervening out of anger, or am I intervening out of love? And you and I talked last night, you gave the great story about the samurai warriors, and that killing was a duty. It couldn't be done out of anger, and in fact, it was so difficult for a real samurai warrior, he told me, to kill, to take a life, that, he felt like, I need to end my own life because I've taken the life of another. And I've done it because it was my duty to do it. I didn't do it out of anger in any way. So resisting from a clean heart doesn't mean that I have to sit my hands and watch somebody being kind of vilified or a child being raped.
Yeah. I look at just our own diversity in our own animal kingdom. And I remember I had a powerful ayahuasca ceremony where I was connecting with different animals. And I went down the list and connected, and I have very cool stories with the different animals. But I got down to mosquitoes. And you're just someone who's had malaria. So I've never had malaria, but I still, I'm a little bit allergic to them. So I get big welts and they itch like hell. And that's unpleasant experience for me. So I connected with mosquitoes, and I basically said, like, mosquitoes,
what's the deal?
What's the deal? Like, what the fuck? And they're like, whoa. And it was like, there was an overmind. It was like the soul. It wasn't like one mosquito. I wasn't talking to Larry the mosquito. It was like, I'm talking to capital M mosquito. Right? It was like one mind of all of these insects. And I remember mosquito was like, whoa, man. Like, take it easy with the judgment. We're just nature's tax collectors. You got all this blood. We take a little bit from you. The frogs eat us. They get a little bit of blood. It's all good. This is part of the cycle. You got plenty. Don't worry about it. You're not going to run out. And I was like, yeah. Fair. Good point. I was like, but what about malaria? And the mosquitoes were like, don't talk to us about that. That's a parasite that's in us. You got to go talk to malaria. And then I look over in my astral vision. Obviously, you can't turn your head to look at something, but I focus my attention and I see this swirling, chaotic mess that's malaria. Now, from my perspective, it was a mess. Maybe there was a divine order in that. However, I was like, hell no, I'm not talking to malaria. Like, I'm going to leave that one be. So in this idea of parasites in the human biosphere, or the, Gaia's biosphere, it's a very interesting energy that they're abiding in, right? So take the parasite Toxoplasma gondii.
Okay.
They infect mice, and then they actually rewire the mice's brains to be attracted to cats.
Yes.
And then the cats eat
Pass
the
it on to
mice.
us.
And they do. We can get it too. And then we also have our own issues with it. But we're not necessarily attracted to cats, but we're attracted to danger, and then there's hypersexuality. There's lots of things that happen. But it completes its life cycle inside the bellies of the cats. But the mice are being controlled by something that is not the mice.
Yes.
The parasites are actually controlling it to their own demise.
Yeah.
So if you take that energy and you make that energy an egregore, there is a parasitic energy that even could be generated and seen in the natural order of Gaia herself.
Yes.
Now, if there were many, many planets that had many different structures of life that had developed, there would be a parasitic force that exists. So whether there's primacy to that force that God said, I'm going to create a parasitic force, or whether the parasitic force developed from the evolution of life, I don't know that answer. But nonetheless, this idea that there's a parasitic egregore that is designed to hijack our own brains and lead us down into our own demise for its own sake, you can apply that to, more evolved beings who are just tapped into that kind of energy.
That's beautiful. I love it. Absolutely love it. And I mean, we're 80%, we're basically taxi cabs for bacteria. 80% of the gut is foreign matter. It doesn't belong to the human at all. And so we're taxi cabs for them. So it feels to me that in the sense we volunteered then, the souls volunteered for a three-dimensional incarnation. And in that primordial state of being souls, we know exactly what the parameters are, what life is like on planet Earth. I think we're excellent biologists at that stage. We're excellent geneticists at that stage. We have all the data we need. But we agree to kind of the limitation of our faculties in order to experience stuff as a problem, and the problem is an invitation to self-transcendence. I remember an old man in Africa said to me one time, I was big into community development. I was a headmaster of high school. I was involved with agricultural projects, with water projects, whatever. And so when we were trained to go into an area, figure out what the needs of the community are, who the leaders are, what the problems are, what the solutions are. And I'm given a spiel one day, sitting outside at a meeting with a bunch of the elders, and this old man is smiling as I'm talking, and I'm talking, we need water is our big problem here. I got a contact in Europe that I can kind of get some kind of pipes. You supply the labour, and we'll bring water to the village. It'll be a 2-year project. And this old man smiling and saying to me, he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "I'm sure. I'm 26 years old. I'm Irish. I know everything." "Yeah, sure." And he says, "Can you tell me why it is for you Europeans that your only response to a problem is to want to solve it?" Dude, what's up with you? What do you do with a problem except solve it? And I'll never forget what he said to me. We were talking in Swahili, but he said more or less, he said, a problem is an invitation to self-transcendence. And if all you do with the problem is solve it, life will just give you another problem. And if your response to the second problem is to solve it, life will give you a third problem. And so we're here in order to transcend. We're here with the limitations that we've accepted. And there's 4 great limitations we've come down with, it seems to me. The first thing is the limitation of our size. We who are cosmic beings who inhabited the cosmos are now stuck in these, in my case, 150-pound, spacesuits. The second thing is we who have cosmic intelligence, who co-created the cosmos with God, are now operating with this little 3-pound laptop, between our ears. The third one is that this one is so small that we can't grok the entire gestalt of our experiences, so we break them up into bite-sized pieces and we process them sequentially, giving rise to the illusion of time. And the fourth thing is we have amnesia completely for who we are, where we came from, who we are, and what our mission is. And so we agree to these 4 kind of restrictions, because the idea is, can you be blindfolded and still find your way home? And that, can you still remember that you're God? Can you still remember that everybody else is God with these 4 extraordinary limitations? And we say, yeah, sign me up for that. And part of the bacteria and the situation, this kind of a vicious cycle, everybody eating everybody else, because it's not a food pyramid. Even Bobby has inverted it. It's not a pyramid. It's a circle. Oh. So we, say kind of flora eat sunlight, fauna eat flora. Omnivores eat animals, humans eat everything they can find, the bacteria are eating us, and then we die and we feed the worms, and the worms start the cycle all over again. So we agree to that. That's the agreement of coming to a 3-dimensional reality on planet Earth. These are the parameters. Now the question is, can you use that to transcend? Can you harvest that? instead of getting stuck in the individual kind of stages of it and trying to fix this element of it, can you stand back and say, okay, I volunteered to be here now. I knew exactly what I was coming in for. I knew exactly what my previous track history was in my previous incarnations, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. I knew exactly the track history of everybody I'm going to encounter and every situation in which I'm going to find myself. I know exactly what I'm coming in for, but I said, yes, send me anyway. Because I will try to remember that I'm a holographic fractal of source. I will try to develop Christ consciousness. I will try to identify the divine in everything I encounter, even the bacteria. They have a purpose, and part of the purpose is, can you wake up? If I kind of give you malaria, can you wake up anyway? Can you harvest that situation? And for me, I was lucky enough, yeah, I can harvest that situation to get visions. Okay, give me your best shot.
Yeah, we were talking about, the warrior archetype, right, and talking about some of our own high-level operators on the SEAL teams and different operators. And, there's a very famous speech from a Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink, who talks about all of these bad things happening. And after every one, he says, good,
amazing,
good,
amazing,
good. Which is this radical idea, this kind of stoic idea that whatever is happening to you is happening for you.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a very key component of this evolution and transcendence is like, how can I use this for my own benefit? And also, how can I let go of what's happening in the past?
Yes.
And I was telling you the funny
story. That was brilliant story. Repeat that one.
I was telling you the funny story. I watched Lone Survivor again recently, and they're in this just crazy firefight with the Taliban in the mountains of Afghanistan. True story of Marcus Luttrell. And the team's getting shot to hell, and they're throwing themselves off ravines to try and escape, and they're way outgunned, and they got no support. And one of them gets shot, and he goes, "Fuck, I just been shot." And one of the other guys looks over to him and says, "Stop living in the past, Danny." And that happened like 5 seconds ago. Fuck, I've been shot. Stop living in the past, Danny. And they've really trained that aspect of themselves. So they've mastered a certain vector. And then they leave the teams and they have their own challenges. Many of them, that life was actually easier than integrating into normal life. Because society. Things, with their focus that narrowed, it actually allowed them to, reach their maximum potential in that archetype. But when they had to broaden their archetype, that's where some more of the challenges start to come, and then having to deal with the traumas that they've compartmentalized, etc.
That's beautiful. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
So there's a practice I have for myself as well, that faced with any kind of a practical problem, that I walk myself through 5 stages. And the first thing I say, I remind myself I'm a holographic fractal of source. A bite-sized piece of God. Secondly, I volunteer to be here now. I'm not here by accident, the wrong place and the wrong time. Thirdly, I want to be grateful for all of the resources I have, all the friends I have, all the possibilities I have in my life, the education I've had or whatever. Fourthly, I want to be sure that I can harvest this present predicament, to spread Christ consciousness on the planet. And now, fifthly, at that stage, what's the practical solution to the problem right now? But firstly, I've stepped myself through the other 4 stages, so I'm not going to go straight to the solution and then make a bigger mess than I started out with. So just to walk myself through those stages becomes really important, because it brings a totally different perspective then to the practical steps that need to be taken. I'm not rushing into a kind of a solution that's going to create more problems than the initial one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, right now, what's very active and alive is what's going on in Iran. And Iran has, as many people know, a very, very deep history. And I think the world has not given enough credit for the beauty of Zoroastrianism, which originated in Iran, and I think is a great, or orienting story to the cosmos. And the whole point is to be an Ashavan, the one who does good, and to resist the impulses of the Druzhvan, of those darker impulses that can come through us, Angramenyu, versus versus the Hashem, the Most High, the one that represents the good. And so it is a religion of monotheistic duality, but it actually orients you to differentiation and invites you onto that path. And that originated there. There's so much rich culture and heritage, and there's so much intelligence and beauty. And then obviously the Islamic fundamentalist regime comes in, and they kind of they change the flag, they crush the spirit, they change the language, and it's like they've really kind of overtaken that culture. And then this culture is now in open revolution. They're trying to liberate themselves. And there's these incredibly powerful videos of Iranians just crying out for help, literally crying, like, please help us. Like, we do not have the ability to resist. We're getting mowed down. You know, reports right now are anywhere from 12,000 to 20,000 killed. And, you know, and President Trump has said, you know, help is on its way. Well, what does that mean? And what do we do? And how do we not make a bigger mess than is already the mess that's there? So how do you look at a situation like what's happening in Iran? Like, how do you diagnose it? If you were brought into a council, like a spiritual council, which I think should be a part of every war decision, is there should be like a spiritual council that's talking about this. And it's not only that you have spiritual wisdom, but you also have psychological and a vast array of, you know, intellectual and spiritual faculties. But if you were going to be in the spiritual council there and try and diagnose what to do, how would you address this?
Okay. So I want to kind of just back up first and agree with you that Zoroastrianism has been such a huge influence. You know, historically speaking, the last two tribes of Israel were exiled in the year 587 BCE by the Babylonians. You know, they were brought into exile. And the Persians overthrew the Babylonians in the year 537 BCE and set the Israelites free to go back to the land of Israel. But in the meantime, in their time in Babylon, they are exposed to Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrianism had, as you said, had telescoped the kind of the multiplicity of divinities down to two, a god of light and a god of dark, Ahriman and Ahura Mazda. And Judaism brought that back, you know, created a monotheistic culture. Now, the difficulty is when you try to bring together the light and the dark, Ahriman and Lucifer, it's a very difficult, it's a kind of Janus figure with two faces. So how do you integrate those? And I love this notion of the kind of the Vesica five spices. If you've got two mathematical sets overlapping, you know, you have a kind of a vulva-shaped, you know, overlap. And I think it is the birth canal for the next level of human consciousness. You need the presence of light and dark in order to kind of activate the Christ consciousness. So I think Zoroastrianism and Persia modeled that for us, you know, 2,500 years ago. Now, I think it's for me, this is a typical situation in where, you know, it is not only permissible, but it is advisable to resist evil. And obviously, this is an evil situation where people are being mowed down, that an extraordinary developed culture has been suppressed. Women have been totally suppressed within the system. Justice has been suppressed. And if the only way you can deal with that is some form of physical resistance to it, then physical resistance is not only acceptable, it may be mandated. And for me, you know, I'm really happy to see some kind of an intervention from the outside. You know, whether it's boots on the ground, I wouldn't, maybe not that, but some way that you have to take that kind of leadership out of positions of power to allow the people to kind of articulate their own wisdom and their own spirituality. And so just to watch them being mowed down and sit in our hands, that for me, that's not compassion. You know, so I have no idea what the plan is, or obviously it's very, very complicated because there's a history there. There are other regions to be, and other countries in the region to be considered. But that, for me, I think that the ultimate question is, what is the loving thing to do with this situation? What is the form of compassion that's active, that needs to be activated? And it is not, attaboy, you're doing a great job, you're not suppressing people and killing 2,300. It is not, you know, kind of cooperating with the regime. It's not trying to compensate for their mistakes. At this stage, it's really confronting it. And it seems that these regimes, very often, the only thing they experience is some form of physical intervention. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I think there are, hopefully, that the other Arab nations in the region would cooperate with the United States and with Israel to kind of replace this regime. I'm not in favour of kind of moving in like we did like in Afghanistan and creating chaos in our wake, but somehow that the leadership needs to be taken out of their position right now, whatever that looks like. When I look at, for instance, the snatching of Madura, and for me, that was an extraordinary, that you could go in with such precision and in 2.5 hour period of time, snatch somebody who is that well shielded and take him out of action. And the cheering that goes on, you know, as a result in Venezuela. I think there's something comparable is being called for in this situation. I don't know what it's going to look like, and it may be much more complicated because they may be much more prepared at this stage to defend their leaders, the Ayatollah or whatever, than Maduro's squad was. But they need to be taken out of the equation because there's not going to be peace there. And for me, it's a sin to see an extraordinary culture being suppressed. I mean, now with thousands of martyrs, that their blood is not being kind of a cry for justice to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. There's a movie about, and I don't know if it was made by an Irishman, but it's called Boondock Saints. And there's, you ever seen that?
No, never heard of it.
There's a quote in there, and it's, I think maybe a quote that could be in scripture, but it's not, it's something to the effect of, actually, I'm gonna look it up. I got it.
Yeah.
So the quote from this movie is, "Now we must all fear evil men, but there is another kind of evil which we must fear most, and that is the indifference of good men."
Yeah, that's brilliant.
And it seems like we're in this interesting paradoxical situation now where we have a, human-centric consciousness that's trying to be birthed and a cosmocentric consciousness.
Yes.
And then, so this idea of this kind of nationalist, if it's not on our soil, let's not worry about it. And surely we have plenty of problems that we need to focus on here in our own country. But also for those who have a human-centric consciousness, it's difficult to look at these things that are happening in different cultures, even in Africa, right? There's the idea of clitorectomies or female genital mutilation. Now, this has been culturally indoctrinated, so some women are choosing this themselves, and so some argument could be, okay, well, if they want to do it, they can do it. But this fundamental idea is it's a broken idea that there's something wrong with the way that God, created our bodies, and so we must do this thing. And so it's this kind of gentle, we must allow people to express themselves their own way, but also in that kind of energy of, okay, but this is too far. You can't mow down, in a sense, civilians. We have to somehow bring a new level of consciousness that serves the good of the whole, because those people getting killed are not just those people over there. They're us living a different life.
Right.
And so it puts us in this kind of very difficult position of, all right, so what do we do? How do we hold this? Do we look away because it's just too much, or do we try and do something? And then if we do something, are we aware of those other motivations that may be riding the resources, the et cetera? Like, how do we separate our own actual desires from other desires that may be conscious or subconscious that are in there? It's just it's a very confusing time in the world to be connected now through the internet to the world. Maybe 40 years ago we would hear about some horror going on, but now we get to see it. And so now this is like really shaking people. And then there's politics that are trying to use these things to divide us even further. But again, I think it goes back to there's human laws, and then there's cosmic laws, and there's certain cases where the cosmic laws are being violated.
Yeah, I do completely agree with you. So, I mean, this is for me now is where the kind of the five aspects of compassion I spoke about. There's the kind of neurological, watching what's happening. Literally, I suspect that the mirror neurons in compassionate people are being activated by what's happening in neuron right now. So that at that level, neurologically, we're being affected by it. Definitely, psychologically, you're affected by. You see people being, human rights being destroyed, people being mowed down in the streets. So emotionally, you're affected by it. Thirdly, sociologically, that's the one that we're not getting right now, it seems to me. Obviously, the fourth level, the spiritual and praying and kind of radiating that area of the world with love and peaceful thoughts, and then finally realizing that in some senses, it's God's gig as well, so it'll work out in some way. But the missing piece is the sociological factor. What does the sociological dimension of this situation call for at this stage? What kind of intervention are we kind of mandated to make out of compassion at this stage? Because I think the other four we've covered in this instance, this one we haven't covered. And so what would the sociological intervention look like learning from past mistakes where you kind of overthrow a regime and then you replace it with something which is worse, and that unfortunately violent revolutions, in my experience, and I lived in Africa during a period of time when many of the African nations were getting their independence from colonial powers, but they did it through violence. And what happened is that you just substituted one crowd of dictators with another. The white colonialists were taken out, and now you've got black colonialists for their own people. So I'd be really, really sure that, there's a difference between evolution and revolution. So, how do you balance the two, that there needs to be some kind of physical resistance to evil, and at the same time that it's an evolutionary trajectory rather than a revolutionary trajectory, that you're not just going to kind of create, violent people in the process of gaining their freedom. Because once you realize that violence is the quickest way to resolve a problem, then you tend to use violence for all the other problems you subsequently encounter. So this really knife-edged dance between evolution and revolution is really important. How we handle this now in such a way that you're not going to kind of create, a new breed of monsters in the place of the ayatollahs and the mullahs like that people who achieved their independence and their freedom through physical violence. So obviously some level of physical resistance is really important. And the fact that these people, have risked and have paid the cost with their own lives shows me a real need, a real strong need in the group, and also an extraordinary reserve and a kind of strength in the culture. And certainly as fellow citizens of the planet, we need to intervene in some way.
Uh-huh.
I agree with you that this is a global concern at this stage. This is not just individual nations doing their own thing, and that's not our business. We're a global community, and I would agree with you that we're not even just a global community, we're a cosmic community, that there are beings elsewhere as well, and that we're part of that dynamic, and that, the way in which we relate to those is important. So the dance then for me is that revolutions tend to be bloody and quick and get results very, very fast, and then lead to further revolutions very, very quickly. Evolution tends to be much slower, but it achieves much more lasting results. But evolution can involve physical resistance. And the question is then, what is the balance between physical resistance, which doesn't lead, just to outright violence, and to a mindset that figures out, okay, violence works, let's keep doing it. Let's now keep ourselves in power, the new group, because violence got us here and violence can keep us here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we underindex the importance of what happens to the collective consciousness when we actually liberate an Iranian people to actually be participating in their own song. Yeah. Literally, their national anthem was changed. Yeah. And they can't even sing their own song for their own country. Yeah. Their own identity has been overtaken by another identity. Yeah. And so it's been squashed. And so what happens, not only for those individual people, but for the whole.
Yes.
And I think this consciousness moving for the sake of the whole, para el bien de todos, for the good of all, I think we underindex how important it is. Same with we underindex how devastating it is when a monk or a group of monks is massacred. What are they doing? Well, they were just up on the mountain praying. Well, that's a deal for the monks. No, it's not. They were anchoring a consciousness for our noosphere that was really, really, really important. And so this is not a small, isolated, separate issue. When Quang Duc self-immolated as a form of, peaceful resistance to bring awareness to this, he was doing so not just for his people, but for the planet. And I think we have to understand that we have to shift our consciousness, or this game is going to be, we're going to have to restart the game again, and it will restart. If we miss our chance here. But what a shame! There's so much beauty here.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So it's a question of an expanding sense of self. That it's not just a skinning capital ego anymore. I'm not, just a sort of being wrapped in a spacesuit. I have an astral self. I've got a mental self, a psychic self, a soul self, and that the entire cosmos itself is kind of an articulation of the divine. And so we are all one. There is only God experiencing herself in some way. And as you talk about this tulpa, then that everything we say, everything we think, everything we do is contributing positively or negatively to this energy system we carry around with us. So I constantly put up little kind of sayings for myself all over my house. So I have one in my bathroom at the moment. So when I'm looking when in the bathroom in the morning, it says, "Are you currently wearing a halo or a tulpa?" What kind of energy are you creating this morning? Are you thinking anxious thoughts or angry thoughts, or thinking loving thoughts? Are you concerned about yourself? Are you kind of concerned about the world, or is it a halo you're wearing right now, or a tulpa? So what kind of energy are you bringing to your day? So that sense of an expansion of the notion of the self, because we're a cosmic being. We're not even just a global being. We're a cosmic being.
Yep. You have so much, breadth of knowledge on so many different religions, and I think there's deep wisdom in the idea that you shall know a tree by its fruits. So if you're going to look at all of the religions that are out there, and you look at the fruits, and you're to say, what has existed already, which religion do you think has produced the most beautiful fruits most consistently? And then what are the exceptions? If we're going to do like a meta-analysis of world religions.
Right. So it's interesting. There's this notion of two kinds of religions, ascending religions and descending religions. And it's interesting, if you put the two triangles together, you get the Star of David. And so the ascending religions tend to be kind of more the monotheistic, which is a kind of a Gnostic kind of reprehensibility about the body, that the body is evil and we're locked in these kind of suits, sensual suits to get angry, whatever, and that we need to liberate ourselves, and focus on the light. And that's kind of the Luciferic impulse of kind of asceticism, and the demeaning sensuality in all its forms, and trying to escape from it. So that would be the ascending religions. The beauty of those is that, there's a focus on the eternal life rather than just the physical life. The descending religions tend to be more female and more polytheistic and much more based on a love of planet Earth, and the delights of planet, whether there's good food or good wine or good sex or whatever it is, but kind of the eschewing of the notion that there's anything beyond. That's just all about here and now. So I love the Star of David, that it unites those two. That is both an ascending quality and a descending quality. So with that kind of a template then, if I look at the basic religions of the world and I try to see them through their eyes, and what I see is that, the shamanistic religions, which is the oldest on the planet, they go back at least 60,000 years in Australia, that they're kind of appreciation of nature, and that literally the cosmos itself was sung into being by the ancestors. And so that sense of participation in nature itself, that's really, really beautiful. But it doesn't mean that they're all kind of saints. And so I think that shamanism brings an extraordinary level of respect for Gaia herself. I think the beauty of the monotheistic religions was that there was an attempt through the mystics of these groups to balance both the ascending and the descending. And the realization that, the greatest form of love, I think the greatest form of love is relationship. It's very easy to be a monk on a mountain. Easy for me to be a monk on a mountain here. If you're in a relationship or you're raising a family, every day you're going to be tested. And so, but they're both necessary. Because the monks that you mentioned in the Himalayas, they're grounded, they're bringing some kind of divine energy and they're grounding it into the ether of the planet itself. So they are contributing, but they're not being tested on a daily basis by having to get up and go to work, kind of feed a sick child, or kind of please a wife who's in bad humor or whatever. And so I think the best way to walk the talk of spirituality is to be in a significant relationship and wonder, how am I doing in this relationship right now? So I think the mystics have a dual role, that they're bringing in the energy of the cosmos itself, and they're trying to ground it in the energy of the planet, and at the same time they're living in a world in which there is all kinds of temptations through excesses. And so the real mystic for me is somebody who can walk with a foot in both camps. Now, I think different people have different talents, like in any team. One guy is a really good defensive player, another guy is an offensive player or whatever. One guy is a great goalkeeper, one guy is a great penalty taker or whatever it is. But that, so we specialize, but that we're here as a team, and that the beauty of religion, or the really great religious traditions, are the ones who've honored their mystics, and eschewed the dogma. And there's always this titanic struggle between the two. And the mystics have held the fire of God alive, in the throes of dogmatic and fundamentalist overlays. I think I said this to you before. When I was a kid growing up in Ireland, we would burn peat, what you call peat here, we call it turf in Ireland. And so there were fires in Ireland which hadn't gone out for 300 years. So, the mother would keep the fire during the day. She cooked in it, keep the family warm. And then at night, when everybody's going to bed, she'd take all the ashes and she'd heap them over the embers, keep them alive. And in the morning, she'd get up and she'd rake it, and the embers are still alive, and she'd add more turf, and the fire would blaze again. And so she was the keeper of the flame, literally, for the household for hundreds of years. So I think the mystics were the keepers of the flames, and that dogma tended to kind of put the fires out and squelch the fires. So the mystic's job was to kind of hide the embers until it was more opportune to blow upon them again and fan them into flame. And it seems to me that that's the stage of world religions right now, that the mystics are beginning to re-emerge again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's happening in some form in Iran, in Persia, in the sense that even though it's they're kind of organizing against formal religion, but what they're kind of uncovering is the kind of the fire of life, in the real sense of the fire of life, the soul self. And that, we need to blow upon those embers and kind of fan it into flame and support, the conflagration, not the burning, not the physical burning of buildings, but the burning of the heart, and it's on fire with the love of God.
Yeah. You told me a story about St. Francis and how something comes from a mystic and then, follows. So tell that story again and the progression, and then that'll lead us into how do we create something new with this new, the new mystics that are arising that did not repeat the history. Okay.
So I give a whole series of homilies in the last 3 or 4 months to my own community, and I call it the 10 steps from inspiration to Inquisition. And I see this not just in religions, I see it in political systems, in economic models, in educational systems, in entertainment models, that you start off with an extraordinary inspiration. You're inspired by the universe to do something, a new venture. The second stage is now, often a charismatic character will work with that inspiration and create something new, a Jesus figure or a Buddha figure or whatever. The third stage is, this is a real dynamic, charismatic character, and so their followers are going to attach themselves to this person. That's stage 3. Stage 4 is, they don't quite understand his teaching, but they're attracted by his personality and by just the energy coming off him. Stage 4 is almost inevitably that guy's going to get whacked. He's going to be, taken out of circulation one way or the other, doxed or actually killed. The 5th stage is now the followers are saying, what are we going to do now? So they create some kind of an organization in his memory, stage 5. Now, inevitably, stage 6 happens, which is some kind of a self-appointed oligarchy will rise to the top of that organization as stage 6. Stage 7 is now they didn't understand the master's message. They were attracted to him, but they didn't really understand what he was about. And so they now start changing the teaching. And now they insist on some kind of orthodoxy. To be a member of our group, you have to believe A, B, C, D, and E. And if you're not believing these, you can't be one of us anymore. And so now you have to leave the system. You have to insist on orthodoxy. Now, if they become powerful enough, they're now going to kind of make war on others outside who have different belief systems. So now you come some kind of crusades against the people who don't believe what I believe. And then ultimately then you have inquisitions where you turn on your own people. And now if they're out of step in any way, you crucify them or you kill them or you torture them. And so there's the Inquisition. So it goes right through these stages. Now at some stage the system begins, somebody wakes up, some new prophet wakes up and says, guys, this is not what the teacher was about. We totally missed our boat. And so St. Francis comes in the 1200s and he's looking at, 900 years at that stage of a politicized, Romanized kind of system that being overlaid on the Jesus movement. Beginning with Constantine in 325, the Council of Nicaea. And Francis says, this is not what the Master was about. Here's what he was about. And he talks about brother sun and sister moon and kind of love for all creatures, and even has an audience with the Pope. And he sets up a whole new organization that's going to demonstrate what it looks like when you understand the teaching of the Master. And he founds the Franciscans. Within 300 years, the Franciscans, and at the same time you had Saint Dominic, the founder of the Dominican order, the same notion, the reformation of the church and going back to the teaching of the Master. Within 300 years, when the official Inquisition started, it was the Franciscans and the Dominicans who were literally tearing Christians asunder, literally tearing them asunder on the rack because of their heterodoxy. And so you got the same cycle happening again and again. And I see this happening all over the world, this cycle. And we're at a stage now, that I think there are enough people waking up, and because of the internet and our ability to communicate with each other, that a fire in one location can immediately ignite a fire in another location almost instantaneously. And so a monk in Tibet, anchoring, compassion, and a Christian mystic anchoring the love of Jesus in some way, that fire is taking off, and we're passing the torch from culture to culture and setting the cultures on fire with love. And that's where we start right now. And that this is the mission of the light workers. And I think the light workers are being assisted and aided from the other side as well. That there are doulas and light workers and angelic beings surrounding the planet at this stage of our evolution. There's this great notion in Judaism of the tzaddikim. They believe that there are 12 holy men on the planet at any one stage, and that they're literally holding the planet together in God's, for God. And they don't even know each other, but they're on the planet, and they may not even realize I'm a tzaddik, but that's the function. Now, I had a vision a few years ago where I saw a vision of the globe itself, and I could see the lines of longitude and the lines of latitude, and where they intersected, there was a beam of light stationed, and there was one at the North Pole and the South Pole. And when the vision was ended, I calculated it mathematically, and that's 64,442 beings of light. Now, it's a symbolic number, but there's that level of angelic presence around the planet right now, ready to set fire to the... There's that level of light and love, trying to fan the flames that the mystics have kept alive. And we have the ability at this stage to create an inferno of love at this stage. And this is the importance of kind of supporting our brothers and sisters in Persia right now, and in crossing all kinds of cultural barriers and national boundaries, and religious kind of denominational affiliation, into the realization that whatever spirit is working, there is God, and I need to be there. And that, it is becoming doulas for that process and becoming light workers for that process. That's going to take us from mere Homo sapiens into Homo Christus or Homo spiritualis.
What happens inside you? What is that feeling that comes through you when tears well up?
It's my soul speaking. It's not Seán speaking anymore. I know that all of us have our own gifts, and that one of the gifts that I was given was that I know how to channel, so that when I'm asked a question, I'm not trying to remember an answer. What's the proper response to this? It's to try to get the ego completely out of the way, and try to make direct contact with my soul self and say, okay, here's a question right now. Here's something to talk about right now. What am I going to say? And just whatever comes through, let it come through. And at some stages, the Seán part of me is overwhelmed. And I know you've had this experience. You've shared some of them with me, Aubrey. But the Seán part of me, the spacesuit part of me, is overwhelmed with the kind of the energy of the love coming through. Yeah. I can't not cry.
Yeah. When I look at the world, I see a world that really needs us. Like it really, really, really needs us. And for all of these souls and these angelic beings, and I just know they would be irresistibly attracted from their own compassion to want to incarnate and be here. And you have a beautiful story of Hineni, of what we say, when we take this mission. So tell the story of Hineni.
Yeah. And so throughout the Hebrew scripture particularly, I think the first episode actually is an encounter between Eli and Samuel, the prophet Samuel, where Samuel has a dream in which he hears a voice calling out to him. And he thinks it's Eli, the old man, and he gets out of his bed and says, you called me, master? And he says, no, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. And he goes back to sleep, and he hears a voice calling him again. And he goes back to Eli and says, you called me? He said, no, go back to sleep. The next time that happens, say, here I am. And so he goes back to sleep, and the voice calls him, and he says, Hineni, here I am. And you get the very same thing with in Isaiah. So Samuel lives roughly about the time of David, about 1000 BCE, and Isaiah is about 700 BCE. And Isaiah has a vision in the temple, and we know exactly when it was. It was 742 BCE, because he mentioned who was a king, and there's a record in the external world of the same king. God is saying, whom shall I send? And I think, like, not me, I'm a man of unclean lips. And God sends down an angel with a burning coal to heal his lips. And then Isaiah sings this beautiful song, and I have my own version of it that I sing every single morning as part of my morning ritual. And it goes like this. Here I am, Lord. It is I, Lord. I had heard you speaking in the night. I have come, Lord, since you called me. I am holding Gaia in my heart. Hineni.
When I went to Iceland, I had a very profound experience. It was such a beautiful place. The moss was so thick that I never understood lying down in moss, because I never experienced moss that would hold you like a thermopedic bed, or Tempur-Pedic. But it was like a Tempur-Pedic bed. The streams were so clean that you could just cup your hands and drink the water. There's waterfalls and rainbows and crashing waves. And I was with my shaman and teacher, Maestro Alejo. We were on a Wachuma pilgrimage, so my heart was open and my eyes and my mind were open. And we went to this most beautiful place where the water was trickling down in these caves, and I was drinking the water and just sitting on a rock and looking at Gaia. And she was so beautiful. And at that point, I realized how much we look away from her. Mm-hmm. And when we look away, we're not inspired to do what we can. And it's so hard to look, and in Kabbalah, turning the face is Sitra Akra. It's showing your backside to God. It's turning the other side. And on the other side, all kinds of things can happen. All kinds of extractive practices, all kinds of different things that are happening. But if you really look with full open heart and open mind, without your preconceptions and justifications and rationale, then something moves in you and you're inspired to do something. What is that thing to do? Then becomes the question. But that feeling and having access to that feeling, I think that's what's really missing, from so many people. Is the first step is you have to see her. She's here screaming at us. Just look, see me. And if you see me, then you'll love me and you'll want to fight for me and protect me. And I think that's what Gaia is doing. She's just screaming at us like, look. And she's going to get louder and louder and louder until we can see her. And that's what we have to do. Panimo panim, face to face, and not look away.
Yeah. Beautiful.
This would be such a shame to lose this epoch and this iteration.
Right.
I mean, where humans are incredible at their best, horrible at their worst, but incredible fundamentally. There's so much good in the world, and there's so much beauty all around us, everywhere. And it's when we're talking about setting God free, it's about setting us free.
Absolutely.
Like those two are inseparable, and we have to set ourselves free of, first of all, this materialist, reductionist mindset, which is also part of so many religions, that this is just here. Gaia's just here to serve us. Like we don't have to give a shit, And I think people sometimes have that relationship with their mother. Fucking mom. Well, she's been nursing you and caring for you, and I understand, mother-child relationships can be complicated, and not all mothers are all benevolent. I understand all the complications of that. But fundamentally, like, that reverence for the mother is, I think, one of the biggest challenges of these Abrahamic religions, particularly these desert religions. And you don't see that in the wet religions of, like, those maternal, matriarchal religions that are closer to nature. And still, you can sometimes see the same kind of shit pop up where they don't get it. I think we're compelled now to actually set ourselves free. And I think one of those keys is, yes, connect to, God, the universal law, the law that speaks through harmony and speaks through geometry and speaks through mathematics. And, at the end of this, I want you to read that piece, when we're finished, because it speaks to all of that. But it's about looking at every piece and seeing the whole picture, not just what we want to see and not just the tulpa that we're wearing, but, I really like that. Am I wearing a tulpa? Am I wearing my ideology? Or am I wearing a halo? Am I seeing clearly? Is my crown open? Glowing. I mean, a halo is a circle of light above your crown. Like, are you able to see actually clearly? Is your third eye, is it open? Can you actually see? Or are you wearing an ideology? You're wearing a conservative ideology, a liberal ideology, a religious ideology that's actually blinding you from just seeing what is there and available.
Beautiful stuff, Aubrey. And one of the things that strikes me about what you just said is that we hope we don't lose this opportunity, because in some senses, to tie it into our discussion of Iran, that in some senses the Iran situation is like a fractal of the opportunity we have as a planet to kind of wake up. And so, what we will subsequently do and how we will kind of help out with the Iranian situation, I think, is going to be emblematic of how we're going to kind of deal with the global situation. We're being invited into the next level of what it means to be a child of God as a globe.
Yeah. And these, if there are grid systems like you saw in your vision, there's a part of this grid that is not lit up, and there's a song that's not being sung, so the chorus is out of harmony, and we need all of the songs now. This is now like Gaia needs to sing her national anthem, and then as soon as we start singing our national anthem, I believe that we'll be invited to sing our song into a cosmological anthem. But we got to get our fucking song together.
Absolutely.
So it's not just 237 countries, or however many there are, each with their own song. And then all the little songs between those of the different religions or tribes, or, Liverpool versus Manchester songs, or whatever the fuck, other things. That's all fun and games, blessings to sports. I love sports. But nonetheless, there's this, yes, you can all sing your own song of the self, the song of the tribe song, but we got to sing Gaia's song together. And I think if we don't have some of these voices, then we're not going to be able to sing that song. And that song will include a version of the Islamic songs. But when it twists to the fundamentalist versions, because there's seeds in there that actually sprout certain different types of fundamentalism. And I think, the Eastern religions haven't had as many seeds that could be turned into like violent, kind of fundamentalist ideologies. You don't see a bunch of, radical Taoists out there, kind of imposing their will, or radical Buddhists out there. I mean, and not that there haven't been horrors done by people who maybe ascribe themselves to those religions, but it's interesting to see like what happens when there's enough kind of soil and enough seeds of some deviation that can lead to a fundamentalism that is really like choking the voice of the people.
It's brilliant. And I mean, when I think about fundamentalism, I always see it going through 4 stages, whether it's in religion or economics or politics or whatever. And the first stage is always the kind of the radical simplification of very complex phenomena. It's like reducing God to a bumper sticker, reducing kind of mysticism to a bumper sticker. That's always the first stage. You take a very complex phenomenon, you try to articulate it, on a bumper sticker. The second stage always is that you either identify or you create an enemy. The third stage is that you dehumanize the enemy. And the fourth stage is you make war on it. And you see this happening again and again and again. You saw it with Jews throughout human history. The kind of the radical reduction of Judaism, to bumper stickers, the kind of the vilification, calling them, by all kinds of foul names, and then making war on them. You saw it in Rwanda in the 1990s between the Tutsis and the Hutus. The very same thing, that you radically reduce a complex tribal situation to a bumper sticker, and then you start calling them cockroaches, was the name that the Hutu had for the Tutsis, and then you declare war on them, and then you wipe them out. There were like 950,000 people killed in a 3-month period during that. And I see that again, that the essence of fundamentalism is that you go through those 4 stages: simplification, defining or creating an enemy, dehumanizing the enemy, and then making war on the enemy. And I see the exact opposite happening with mysticism. And mysticism is a refusal to use a cataphatic language. Cataphatic language is, the language that purports to describe God in infinite detail, who God is, what God had for breakfast. And the opposite of that is apophatic, the language of neti, X, God is not X, Y, God is not Y. How about Z? God is not Z. You can't articulate God. So instead of reducing the complex, realizing it's a mystery, you have to embrace the mystery. And then instead of kind of identifying an enemy, you realize that all people are my brother and my sister. We're all sparks of the divine. So it's the very opposite, of kind of identifying the enemy. The third one, dehumanizing it. You divinize it. You realize they're all God in disguise, And the fourth thing, instead of making war on it, you make love to it. So when you look at the mystic and the fundamentalist, they're going in exactly the opposite directions through those 4 stages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction about leaving the space for the mystery.
Yeah.
And I'd promised I was going to share with you this Gnostic idea of abraxas.
Oh,
and
yes,
I want to
yes.
share this with you here. This is Jung's description from his 7 Sermons to the Dead, and he's talking about abraxas, which was originally a Gnostic idea. Abraxas is the God whom it is difficult to know. His power is greatest because man perceiveth it not. From the sun he draweth the summum bonum, from the devil the infamum malum, but from Abraxas life altogether, which is beyond measure and reckoning. Abraxas is the sun, and at the same time the eternally sucking gorge of the void, the belittling and dismembering devil. The power of Abraxas is twofold, but ye see it not, because in your eyes the warring opposites of this power are cancelled out. What the sun god speaketh is life, what the devil speaketh is death. But Abraxas speaketh that hallowed and accursed word, which is life and death at the same time. Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxas terrible? It is splendid as the lion in the instant he striketh down his victim. It is beautiful as a day of spring. It is the beloved and the lover. It is the terrible and the dark and the cruel. It is the brightest light and the darkest night of madness.
Powerful stuff. Beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges we have is there is this kind of unity idea. This is what Abraxas is talking about. It's all of it. Okay, but all of it's a lot. That's a lot to grok. So, when we talk about God, we're not talking about the dark aspects of God. We're talking about like, I want to do God's will. Well, we're talking about the sun god in this metaphor, right? Like it's the one that's bringing life, which may include destruction. But so how do you parse out, the God that is Abraxas, that is everything, all the good, all the evil, all of it, from the God that we're actually aspiring to to be and in us, as us, through us, and beyond us. Not trying to be God, but to represent that we're a bite-sized piece, as you say, a holographic fractal of God. Like, how do you, in your own cosmology, deal with those two kind of ideas of God that is all that is good, and God that is all that is good and evil and everything?
Yeah, it's a powerful, powerful question. And for me, when I think about it, it's that, when we decided, this vision I had where we created this, what I call a pre-cosmic cosmos, where we decided to create a cosmos, and be observers, mere observers of it, and delight, in how this cosmos was articulating itself. And then the second one was, what if we were to create avatars, and take up and play parts in this and experience it from the inside out? What would that look like? And at that stage then, there was the gift of free will. What if you can do whatever you want, as an avatar in the system? Initially, the system was so devised or programmed or set up that it was actually perfect in all its orientations. Everything worked perfectly like a great clock. There was no problems. It just kept ticking over, and it was delightful to watch it, galaxies forming and stars being birthed. But once you introduce, participation in it, and you add to that the gift of free will, which means faced with any situation, you make any choice you want. And there are kind of indications. If you make good choices, here are the results. If you make selfish choices, here are the results. That you're totally free to do whatever you want. And so I differentiate then between freedom and free will. That freedom is the ability to do as pleases God, and free will is the ability to do as pleases the ego. And so they're very, very, very different. So for me, the only free person is the person who's choosing the good, who's choosing compassion and love on a regular basis. Otherwise, we're enthralled to, proclivities of various kinds because of the space which we inhabit. And so in some senses, everything that emerges is acceptable, and therefore it's of God, including decisions to murder or to rape or to kill or to child traffic in some sense. So that's what you want to experiment with, see where it takes you. And does it bring happiness, to the individual doing it? Does it bring happiness to the community that lost a child? Does it bring happiness to the culture or whatever? What are the results of it? And that is basically, it's the ultimate form of research where the outcomes and the fruit demonstrate the quality of the tree. But there's no intervention whatsoever. God is not saying, oh, no, you can't do that. I'm not allowing that. That's a bridge too far. But that in some senses, we're stuck in the illusion of time. We think that there's a past, a present, and a future. I don't believe there are any, that there's only the eternal now. I remember when I was studying physics in college, the professor gave us this conundrum. He said, there's a big locomotive, 100-ton, a 100-ton locomotive barreling along a track, going from east to west at 80 miles an hour. And going from west to east is a mosquito going at 2 miles an hour. And they crash. Now in mathematics, you can't go in this direction and reverse yourself without temporarily coming to a complete stop. You can't go from a positive speed east to west and then reverse yourself going west to east without coming instantaneously to a stop. So presumably the stop happened when he hit the mosquito hit the train. Now, if the mosquito stopped when it hit the train must have stopped when it hit the mosquito. Because there must have been a moment where there was no movement whatsoever, the moment of impact. And therefore, the train meeting a whole bunch of mosquitoes is just jumping along in increments. Now, there's a solution that obviously is the kind of conservation of momentum, but it got us thinking. And what I took from it is, in some senses, there's this splink of time between the past and the future, between going from east to west and going from west to east, when there's just a total now. And we live totally just in those moments. And then we string them together and we create the notion of time, a past, a present, and a future. And basically, it's our effort to try to deal with the notion of change or evolution. There'd be no need for time, if we weren't trying to measure change or evolution. So we've devised this thing to try to measure evolution and change and growth. And we call it time, but there isn't. There's not a past and there's not a future. There's only the eternal now, in which all possibilities are resident. And there are, then parallel versions of what's happening in this instant of time. And depending on any configuration of choices we're making, you're going to get what looks like dark, and you're going to look like what will look like light. But they're all just experimenting with the now to see what really brings compassion and love into the equation, and what kind of sets people at variance with each other. So the ability to inhabit the instant when the mosquito hit the locomotive, if you can find that space and stay there, you're in a good space.
Yeah. I mean, it's so many things are a paradox, right? Because there is a timeline, a storyline. That's the line quality. It's moving forward. And then there's the wheel. And the wheel is like the substrate of God, Abraxas, source itself. And that substrate is timeless. And the now is the sequencing, as you're saying, of all of these timeless moments into a storyline and a timeline, and both are true, which is a paradox. And I think these thought experiments are really valuable. I'll tell you the one that got me. Here was the one that got me. You have an arrow flying towards a target. I love archery. I have a traditional recurve bow. I shoot it all the time. Wow. It's a great practice for me. And so the thought experiment was given, okay, so if you divide the amount of time, half the distance to the target, and then you divide that amount of time, half the distance from there to the target, and then half the distance from there to the target, how much time is that? And then half the distance from there. There's always half the distance, and there's always half the time. Mm-hmm. So if there's always a little bit of time left in the half, then the arrow never hits the target. Yeah. And I was like, oh man, how do I work myself through that? And I think it ultimately leads you to this understanding of actually infinity. Yes. And Rebbe Gafni, he says, infinity is not a whole bunch of time. Yeah. It's not like, that's what we think. It's like, oh yeah, infinity. It's like a ton of time. No. It's timeless. Like absolutely. There is, and that's the underpinning. Yeah. That's the substrate, and that's love. Yeah, totally. Or God.
That's beautiful.
Or whatever's underneath it.
There's another very famous version of your archery, a kind of image, and it was a kind of two medieval theologians arguing with each other, and one guy saying exactly that. If I have to walk to the door, I have to walk halfway there first, and then half of the remaining distance, and half of that, and half of that. So there's an infinite of pieces still to be walked, so I never actually get there. And the guy responded, and he says, Veritas ambulandi. The truth is in the walking. Watch me. And he walks to the door.
Yeah. And then when you get a paradox like that, the way to resolve the paradox is to laugh.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's, I think, what the mystics have always done is they're able to embrace the paradox and hold it with laughter. Yeah. So at the same time as I've experienced the divine, there's just like the great pain and anguish. It's Yeshua on the stations of the cross. God, why have you forsaken me? Exactly. Like what? And which I felt, in my own experience as, what have we done? It wasn't like a personalized. This was just my own experience of feeling that energy. It was Yeshua crying out like, what have we done? God, what have we done?
Exactly.
Like we've created these instruments of torture, and what have we done?
That's beautiful.
And then there's the other part that's just infinite laughter. Like, oh my God, look at this. And I think that's where comedians play such an essential role in our world, is they bring us into that state of laughter where if you're in a state of laughter, everything makes sense. Only when you're really laughing. That's when things make sense. But you can have both the deep anguish of all of the suffering, and then the laughter of just the madness of it all, and the beauty, and all of it put together.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I want to move, so I want to just kind of maybe heartstorm here together, and so we'll finish with you reading your piece. Anything else that you're thinking?
I mean, it's amazing to me that I am meeting so many light workers in the last year or two. Having been, I'd be 80 years old in October. I worked as a missionary. I worked in the Catholic Diocese of Nakuru in Kenya. I worked in the Diocese of San Jose here in California. I was a spiritual director for 28 years of Companions on the Journey. But I'm finding that for the last 2 or 3 years, it's like I'm managing to meet so many light workers in a way I have never done before. You being among them. But other kind of podcasts I've done, people have invited me to share with them. So much so that I resigned from Companions on the Journey in September. I get in 3 months' notice that, instead of speaking to a congregation of 45 people on a Sunday, I can have a conversation with Aubrey Marcus and reach nearly 250,000 viewers. And so I decided to make a kind of a pivot and to try to more and more become available to meet other light workers, who are doing what I've been trying to do and doing it much more successfully than I've done it, and to see if I can kind of put my shoulder to the wheel and assist in that process. And so having you come up to my home and bless my home with your presence, and for you as well, Ryan, thanking you, my brother, that the energy that you bring here, not just the ideas that you have, but the energy that you bring, that for me it's strengthened me in my resolve. I have a practice, I call it the Christ consciousness sandwich. One of the things I do in the first thing in the morning is to say, how can I promote Christ consciousness today? What do I need to be doing in order to promote Christ consciousness? And when I'm going to bed at night saying, how much did I promote Christ consciousness today? So for me, I call it a Christ consciousness sandwich. The intention as I begin my day and the kind of review at the end of my day. How much work have I done, to help in this process? And meeting people like you, has been an extraordinary gift to me to know that there's such people out there doing this kind of work, and that, I can cooperate with them in some small way, and that together, we can create this creative light workers around the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does that give you hope?
Absolutely. I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful. I know that it's going to work out, and for me, I'm not concerned about the timing, in the sense that this is God's gig ultimately. I'd like it to happen in a particular timeline, in a particular way. But I know, there's a great Yiddish saying, "Mensch tracht and God lacht." Do you know that one?
Mm-hmm.
Men plan and God laughs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we make our plans and God, I like that idea. No, it's not going to go that way. And so the realization that it's God's timing and it's God's way. It's going to happen God's way and God's plan. But I know that it's going to succeed. Because I had this other vision years and years and years ago about souls volunteering in front of God, to take up particular kinds of missions. And this great Mahatma that we know as Gaia, volunteering and saying, send me to that third rock from the sun in that solar system, and I will breathe life in it until I throw up a life form which is capable of recognizing its own divinity, and ipso facto, the divinity of all other life forms with which it shares the planet. And that was the task she set herself. And she'd been at that, the planet is 4.6 billion years old. Life is about 3.7 billion years of age. And she's been throwing up life forms again and again and again, trying to get nearer and nearer and nearer to a species that could literally recognize that they're divine beings and that everything it sees is a divine being. And I think, we may have reached that place in the past and destroyed ourselves at the last minute, maybe in Lemuria or Atlantis or whatever. And this is the current kind of a recursive version of it. We may succeed this time, we may not, but I guarantee you, Gaia is not going to give up. And we'll be back. If we don't manage it this time, we'll be back, we'll reincarnate again, and we'll be part of the movement to push it forward until finally there's a generation that pushes us over the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also have a lot of faith.
Yeah.
I have a lot of faith that somehow it's like the Star Wars movies, the Rebel Alliance, they're up against an unbelievably difficult task. And there's so many challenges that they face. The Empire has reached a state that's, really in absolute domination and control, and different countries and nations have reached that state where Stalin's clamped down completely, and then things have opened up and liberated. Iran might be in that state now. The whole planet's in these different states where it looks hopeless. And then something else happens, and it ultimately works out. And I think that's going to be the trajectory it goes. And it's not about just doing the mathematics and the algorithms about what the probabilities are. They're not accounting for the probability of God. Like that's the missing part of the equation. And I think there is a God's will, and I think God's will is to allow as much different complexity and multiplicity of unique iterations of itself to exist as possible. Like I think God does care. And I think that's an element of the Abraxas version that is just, yes, it's all of that. And there is a will, and that will is, I want to see if all of these different fractals will find their way home. And I want that. And I'll be there to help. They just have to ask.
This flash when you were talking, the mathematician in me, if you divide anything by infinity, you get 0. And if you divide anything by 0, you get infinity. So what happens when you divide infinity by 0? Or 0 by infinity? And that's where God is. That's the mystery there right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love for you to finish with that piece that you read.
Sure.
Because I think it's really beautiful.
Brilliant. So let's just give me I'll give you the background to it. So, having been raised as trained as a Roman Catholic priest, and operating with what was called the Novus Ordo, the version of the Catholic Mass that came with the Vatican II from 1962 to 1965. Before that, we had the Tridentine Mass, which was in Latin, from the Council of Trent, which was 1546 onwards. So for like 400 years, you had a Latin version of the Mass, and then it was changed into the vernacular in 1962 to 65 during Vatican II. And so that was the liturgy I was trained in, and that's the liturgy I celebrated in Kenya. I came to the States. I was in the Diocese of San Jose celebrating this liturgy. Then we founded the new community when I was thrown out of the Diocese of San Jose. But we still use the old liturgy, but my theology and the liturgy I was celebrating were totally at variance with each other. So people were saying, you need to change one or the other. The liturgy is saying the opposite of what your homilies are saying. So we need to resolve this. So I read the introduction to this. This booklet, which I created in 2008, this booklet is a revision of the Mass, which I have written as a result of the questionnaire, community meetings, and homilies dealing with the topic of bringing our liturgy and our theology into alignment with each other. In doing this, I have tried to combine elegance and tradition to prune bad theology and bad psychology. I wanted to create a liturgy that celebrates 13 billion years of God's love affair with the entire universe, and not simply a sectarian, anthropocentric ritual that focuses only on human frailty. Though we can all experience the ineffable transcendence of God, we cannot articulate it, but we can use poetry, art, symbol, and metaphor to give expression to God's immanence. We are the Word made flesh. Everything that exists is an incarnation of God. The Eucharistic prayer of the cosmos, which is the core of the liturgy, seeks to portray this in poetic metaphors. So I sat down on the 26th of December 2008, and in 90 minutes, I produced this. I literally just channeled it. So I call it the Eucharistic prayer of the cosmos. God, you are the cosmic dancer. We honor you. You who choreographed the solar flares, the orbits of the planets, and the wild careening of comets and meteors. You who can name every ancient rock in the asteroid belt. You who can tangle with typhoons and twisters and tornadoes, we honor you. God, the ultimate artist, we honor you. You who paint sunrises and sunsets, the plumage of birds and the camouflage of insects. You who with your finest brushes watercolor the wings of butterflies and the costumes of flowers, we honor you. God, the sculptor, we honor you. You who chisel out rocks and mountain ranges and cup your hands to form sand dunes, we honor you. God, the writer, we honor you. You who leave traces of your penmanship everywhere, holographically concealing your entire magnum opus in every line of the text. You whose mystical meaning is often misunderstood by the scriptures of the world, scriptures in which unity consciousness is fragmented into sectarian separation. You who secreted in the winking of a distant star the Rosetta Stone which would allow us to translate every experience into a Christ consciousness moment of Eureka, we honor you. God, the musician, we honor you. You who make flutes of the willows by the lakeside and of the reeds on the riverbank. You whose bass baritone reverberates in the thunder and whose soprano trills in the morning music of the blackbird. You who drum ecstatically with your raindrops on the sun-parched plains. And you who hold all of these sounds in the silence of a star-studded night sky. We honor you. God, the mathematician, we honor you. You who love to play with binary codes, with base 4 and 6 and 8, with rational numbers and with irrational numbers, with real numbers and with imaginary numbers. You who from nothing created the one, and from the one created the partnership of the two, and from the two created the many, and then from the many collapsed all mystically back to the one, which vanishes into the womb of nothingness, awaiting rebirth. We honor you. God, the physicist, we honor you. Quantum leaping from the impossible to the possible, from the improbable to the probable, and from the potential to the actual. We honor you. God, the biologist, we honor you. You who whirl ecstatically around your own image in the double helix of life-making. We honor you. God, the architect, we honor you. You who silently whisper the secrets of home building in the hearts of weaver birds and ants, in the hearts of spiders and mice, in the sacred geometry of the temple makers, and in the wombs of mammal mothers. We honor you. God, the awakener, we honor you. You who patiently call forth more and more complete images of yourself, until a species is born that remembers fully. You who send avatars into every age to nudge religion towards spirituality and to move us from mere belief in gods to experiences of the God within and the God among us. You who are the sender of Siddhartha and the commissioner of the Christ. You who continue to send countless others to awaken us from illusion. You who are the gentle mother, watching while the great crises of our times are understood for what they really are. Great opportunities for seeing beyond the separation into the oneness of isness, our origin, our mission, and our home. We honor you. Are you a creator, God? You are. Do you design things intelligently? You do. Is it by evolution? It is. And so, since infinity is contained in a single grain of sand, we choose bread, and we choose the blood of the vine, symbols offered us by the avatar, the God-man Jesus. And with altered vision, we see back into his lifetime as a carpenter mystic, to the mystical core of his message, and beyond that, into the purpose of his coming. Even at the greatest crisis time of that incarnation, on the night before he was cruelly killed, even then, he could reach into the core of his own being, and using the food of his last meal with his friends, say, "Take this, all of you, and eat it. This is my body. The body which I accepted at my incarnation. The body that I needed for my mission. The body which is the visible sign of the Word made flesh. And you also have done the same. Remember that." Then, reaching for the cup, he told them, "Take this too, all of you who would aspire to Christ consciousness, for this is the cup of my blood. It binds us together, since we all share the blood of being human. Truly, we are blood brothers and sisters. So it is a covenant between us. It is the final covenant, a covenant to dissolve the illusions of separation. A covenant that opens your eyes to the realization that we are not separate from God, that we are not separate from each other, and that we are not separate from nature. This remembering will take away the sin of living in a state of separation. Whenever you celebrate this ritual, remember that. God, you are the ocean, bathing in the waters of your own awareness. We are the fish, agreeing that we can feel the wetness, but demanding proof that the ocean exists. Help us to awaken. God, you are the lamb, gambolling ecstatically in the meadow of your own mindfulness. We are the sheep, peering jadedly through a prison pen of our own making. Help us to awaken. God, you are the forest, a miracle of ecological cooperation. You are the oak tree in the forest, a miracle of individual might. You are a single leaf on the oak tree, a miracle of intricate skin stretching. You are a cell within that leaf, a reminder of how life was 4 billion years ago. You are an atom within that cell, a reminder of how life was 13 billion years ago. You are the energy within that atom, juggling a multitude of microcosms, each one a hologram of the universe of Hubble. Help us to awaken. God, you are the hound of heaven, following us down the years and down the days. You are the tiger, prowling patiently in the garden of your delights, and we, the prey who fearfully hide from the deadly embrace of being consumed by the mystery. Help us to awaken. And so we acknowledge all of our relations. We acknowledge the stone people, the first children of the rock we call Earth. We acknowledge the plant people, whose intelligence invented photosynthesis and earth life. We acknowledge the winged people, soaring in the vault of the sky, singing and searching. We acknowledge the finid people, silently visiting the depths of the water world. We acknowledge the four-legged people who found the forests and the plains, the wilderness and the desert, and learned to be at peace in all those places. We acknowledge the six-legged and the eight-legged, the most ubiquitous of us all, investigating and inhabiting Gaia like nobody before or since. We acknowledge the 100-legged and the 1,000-legged, the lowly ones taking forever to go nowhere, because nowhere is where the present moment always is. Help us to awaken. And we acknowledge the two-legged ones, the human family which you joined through incarnation. We are one family, but we are the twin energies of our race, the feminine and the masculine, which are the two facets of your immanence. We are the intrepid seekers who started in Africa and then discovered Asia and Europe, America and Australia, the Arctic and the Antarctic. And everywhere we travelled, we found your footprints. We are black and yellow. We are brown and white and red. We are the hues on the palette of your artworking. We have learned to speak 7,000 languages, each one of which can sing of your wonders. Help us to awaken. We have followed the signs of your safari on Gaia, getting occasional glimpses of you in our theologies and having full-on encounters with you in our mystical moments. We are Buddhists and Baha'i. We are Christians and Confucianists. We are Jews and Jains. We are Muslims and Zoroastrians. We are Shintos and Shamanists. We are Sufis and Sikhs. We are Taoists and Hindus. We are seekers, sometimes sleepy seekers, and sometimes awakened ones. Help us to awaken. We do not ask for signs anymore, for we are surrounded by miracles. Rather, we ask only that we come fully awake. We ask that we become mindful of our true nature, which is Buddha nature, that we become aware of our core essence, which is Christ consciousness. Help us to awaken. Through this realization, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, we offer you honor and glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen, brother. As our friend Charles Eisenstein says, the rehearsal is over. It's time to wake up.
This is the real thing.
It's the real thing now. Thank you for everything that you do.
A million thanks to you, brother. And a million thanks to you, Ryan. Thank you.
This is beautiful. And thanks to everybody watching. We
Amen.
love you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.